Oh boy. Well, it's safe to say that that first episode wasn't that great. How is it going, everybody? I hope you all are doing well, but strap yourselves in because we gotta talk about and discuss this very first episode for Tokyo Ghoul Re. And boy, oh boy, do I have mixed feelings on this episode. I'm really curious to know your guys' thoughts because I really have not gone back to rewatch this episode. I've waited 2 days to finally record just my thoughts on this episode. This episode has literally drained the motivation out of me. I haven't heard anyone else's reviews. I've just been marinating on this episode. That's what I have been doing. And the more and more I have thought about this episode, thinking back to the scenes that were in this adaptation and just how fast-paced it was, I was amazed at the pacing of this episode. It was beyond blistering fast. Like, it was ludicrous speed from Spaceballs.
Prepare ship for light speed.
No, light speed is too slow.
Light speed too slow?
Yes, we're gonna have to go right to ludicrous speed.
Prepare ship! Prepare ship for ludicrous speed.
My brains are going into my feet.
But even though the pacing was insane, this was just an okay episode. It was average. It wasn't great by any means, but it wasn't terribly bad either. But even though I'm viewing it as an average episode, and I definitely have a lot of negatives that I did not like about this episode, I still had some positives walking away after finishing episode 1, and one of the key positives that I have is definitely just getting to see these characters in motion, getting to see my favorite characters in Tokyo Ghoul Re interacting with one another, getting to see Heise, the QS Squad, Akira, Torso even, like just getting to see the beginning of Reanimated is very cool, but it's just not going the way I expected Tokyo Ghoul Re to be adapted with the fast pacing that we got. But the two standouts of positivity that I have for this episode are the intro and the ending. The intro, I love the song, and the animation that went along with it was amazing. It spoils a lot for anime onlys, but just getting to see what it was teasing for what will be adapted in here, it had me excited, but then I got into the episode and I was like, oh boy. So then we have the ending. The ending is amazing. I love the ending song, and those ending cards with the QS Squad with Heise, those are like background material. I love the artwork just displayed during the ending credits, and it's something that has really come to my attention just now is like Tokyo Ghoul, even though the middle parts, like the actual episode itself, doesn't tend to be that very good adapted, the intros and the endings are amazing. And two other positives that I took away from this episode, the first one being that they actually kept Urei's inner monologues within this episode. I loved getting to see how they were able to adapt that from the manga and put that into the anime. That was one positive I had within this episode. And everything near the ending of this episode, dealing with Heise talking with Kaneki, leading up to the moment where he cracked his fingers, that part I also really enjoyed as well. I thought that was very well done. But those are basically the main positives that I was able to take away from this episode. But I think the big one that I think everybody loved, they gave us within the first 10 seconds of this episode, and that is the fact that they retconned Route A right out of the gate by showing us that missing poster of Hide. And anime onlys are probably going to be very confused because why would you show a missing poster for a character that we know died in Route A? So I like that they kind of just retcon that. It basically goes to show that Tokyo Ghoul Re is not going to be following the same timeline that Route A created. So those right there are the positives that I was able to take away from this episode. But now is the time to dive into the negatives and the problems that I had after watching this episode. And I think it should go without saying that every single person who's a fan of the Tokyo Ghoul manga and has been reading and keeping up to date with Tokyo Ghoul Re is going to be comparing the first 6 chapters that were adapted into episode 1. It just makes sense because I even went back into volume 1 through the first 6 chapters. Over half of volume 1 was adapted into this episode, but actually looking at how many pages were cut out and what was adapted, it actually shocked me that the earlier chapters don't really have a lot of adaptation, and like chapters 5 and 6, the final 2 chapters that were adapted into this episode, really were adapted to a T. So let me just go through this real quick, and then let me just show you guys what pages were adapted in total. So chapter 1 had 18 pages out of 44 pages adapted. Chapter 2 had 13 out of 22 pages adapted. Chapter 3, 14 out of 22. Chapter 4, 7 out of 18. Chapter 5, 16 out of 18. And then chapter 6, 19 out of 19. So the final 2 chapters were pretty much adapted to a T. And you could see that within the final moments of them going up against Serpent in this episode. But having those first 3 chapters not really get adapted all that well, this is the foundation of the beginning of Tokyo Ghoul. You need these moments to basically be put into here so that way we can care about the characters of Heise, Mitsuki, Shirazu, and Urei. Not really Psycho, because Psycho is not supposed to be within this episode, so I guess that is another positive you can add on to this episode. They're actually sticking that Psycho is absent for a majority of the beginning of Tokyo Ghoul. But my main problem with the poor adaptation with the first 3 to 4 chapters has to do with the character of Heise. If you really look at this episode, we don't spend that much time with Heise, if at all. He pops up here and there, but he isn't really seen as the main character in episode 1. I would honestly say that Urei could be seen as the main character, and he gets more development in this episode than any other character, which kind of sucks because Heise is supposed to be the focal point, the person that we are following along. Sure, we spend some time with Mitsuki, Shirazu, and Urei, but Heise is supposed to be that man of mystery that we are watching and kind of trying to learn more about, because the first 3 to 4 chapters really set up the mystery of Heise's background, but also coming to learn about how different he is within the CCG compared to other investigators, because his personality, he's very gentle and kind, and he's actually looked down upon by the other CCG investigators. We see a brief glimpse of this within the episode that Shimoguchi basically calls him a ghoul and is very cold towards Heise, but other investigators treat him as if, he's just one of them. But there's a mystery behind him. There's something wrong with Heise. There's this mysterious background. And the fact that they didn't even sprinkle in like little foreshadowings of Kaneki talking to him within his mind, I think would have been a better payoff in the end once we saw Kaneki talking with Heise. I honestly think that this connection between Kaneki and Heise could have been handled a lot better and could have added more to the mystery and the curiosity for the anime onlys, because if you separated this episode into 2 episodes where you had chapters 1, 2, and 3 in episode 1 and 4, 5, and 6 in episode 2, the first episode could have sprinkled in here and there these brief moments of Kaneki trying to connect with Heise, but it doesn't go through. And then in episode 2, when Heise is confronting Serpent, we have that impactful moment where Kaneki finally breaks through and is communicating with Heise. He wraps himself around him and is basically saying, "Come on, accept me." That would have been done a lot better, because episode 1 could have had all that character interactions with Heise building him up along with the QS squad and Akira, ending that episode off with Hinami talking with Torso, and then episode 2 could have handled the Torso investigation, and then, having that climactic end with Heise about to go up against Serpent. But because the pacing is so pedal to the metal fast, a lot of the character development we're supposed to have with Heise's character has to get cut for time, and that really does suck, because the character relationships and interactions that Heise has with the QS squad, with Akira, and the other investigators really go to shine a light not only on Heise's predicament within the CCG, but where he kind of falls into place in other people's eyes. The dysfunctionality of the QS squad, I think, gets pretty well represented within this episode, and just how Urei is out on his own, Shirazu is trying to do his best, and Mitsuki is clinging to Heise. I think that is represented pretty well within this episode. But it's the relationships that Heise has with Akira that I think kind of falls flat within this episode, because Heise views Akira as a motherly figure. She is nice, she is warm, and she is kind towards Heise, but she can be stern and serious when she needs to be. Hence the motto punch that we see in this episode. And I kind of hated too that it was just a zoom out shot. But because we don't see the warm side of Akira in this episode, she just comes off as cold towards Heise, and she doesn't show off that motherly love that she kind of sometimes shows towards Heise. So I don't really like how that was represented within this episode, but also getting to see how the other investigators view Heise. We saw a brief glimpse of this with Shimoguchi, calling Heise a ghoul, but everyone else within the CCG kind of acts nice towards Heise, but there's a darkness behind that kindness, because they all know about the dark mystery past that Heise has, and you don't really get that feeling within this episode, and that just sucks because the pacing takes that all away. I can go on even more about Heise within this episode, but I think I'm going to leave it to that right there. But the next point I just want to bring up about this episode that I think really falls flat has to deal with the character of Torso. And I think some of you guys are even like, wait a minute, you have a problem with how Torso was represented in this episode? And I kind of do, because the first 6 chapters deal heavily with the CCG investigation into Torso. But when you look at this episode, what makes Torso so special? Did they mention any of the special traits about Torso and why they are trying to capture him? Because I do not remember if they even mentioned that he takes the torsos of his female victims within this episode. I could be wrong. I do have to go back and rewatch this episode, even if it does pain me. But I do not remember them ever bringing up that information about Torso. And that really does suck, because that is an integral part to this story, and it actually has to tie in with Mitsuki within this episode, but that doesn't even get bring up, which is another disappointment about this. So I don't know if they're going to bring that up in episode 2. It still could be the case. They could bring that up, the revelation we learn about Mitsuki and how Mitsuki will be connected to Torso, but for right now, we did not get that within this episode, and I think that's an integral piece to these beginning chapters that could have been represented a lot better in this first episode, going if they were separated into 2. This could have been a 2-episode arc with this 1 episode's content, and we didn't get that. And I will firmly stick by my opinion that this first episode should have adapted the first 3 chapters. We would have gotten a much better introduction to all of these characters with Heise, the QS squad, Akira, the other investigators, really building upon their relationships and how they interact with one another. But plus, we would have seen actual investigating of Torso, getting to see Heise and the QS squad actually coming up with information and coming to a logical conclusion on the true identity of Torso. Maybe throw in some brief glimpses of Kaneki talking with Heise just to build up to that episode 2 mind-blowing moment when Kaneki talks to Heise, but episode 1 could totally end off with the cliffhanger of Hinami entering the cab, talking with Torso, and letting him know that Ogiri Tree is upset with him. That would have been great just to add to the overall mystery of what is currently being set up within the first episode, but this would have been great for anime onlys because they'd be asking so many questions. Wait a minute, is that Hinami? Why is she in this cab? She's talking with Torso. She mentioned Ogiri Tree. Is Hinami with Torso, and are they both part of Ogiri Tree? What is going on right now? That would have been so much better, and I do kind of wish that was the case, but this is the pacing that we are going to get with this adaptation, and we're just going to have to take it as it is. And those are my thoughts right now from a manga reader's perspective on how I feel about episode 1. I had to get this off my chest, guys. I have been sitting on this episode for the past 2 days, and I just needed to vent just a little bit on the disappointment that I had been feeling after coming off episode 1 of Tokyo Ghoul Re. But now I definitely want to hear your guys' thoughts on this. I really want to hear your perspective from watching this first episode. If you're a manga reader, did you like it? Did you not like it? What were your positive and negatives about this episode? But if you are an anime only and you are going into this blind, you have no idea what the future holds for Tokyo Ghoul Re, the anime, I definitely want to hear your thoughts. Did you guys enjoy this episode, or did you not enjoy it and maybe you found it too confusing? Definitely leave your thoughts down in the comments below, guys. But I can promise you that from Chapter 2 review onward, I'm just going to review this series as is. I'm going to try to keep my manga reader mindset away from here because I am still looking forward to see what gets adapted into this anime adaptation of Tokyo Ghoul Re, because there are some things in particular I am excited to see. And there's one character in particular you guys know I am looking forward to the most. I cannot wait for that moment, but that's going to be it for this review, guys. I promise I will be more on time with the Chapter 2 review. But that's going to be it, guys. So if you guys like Tokyo Ghoul, please feel free to subscribe, because not only will I be talking about the anime, but I will also be talking about the manga as well. I do live reactions and reviews to the Tokyo Ghoul Re manga. So if you guys follow that as well, I would love to talk with you guys further. And I think that's going to basically be it. You guys can talk to me on Twitter about Tokyo Ghoul. A link can be found in the description below. But that's it, guys. Venting is done. So until episode 2, or the next chapter, Tokyo Ghoul comes out, I'll talk with you guys later. See you later, guys.